Hey guys, today we're going to quickly explore the concept of ellipsis. Now, you may already be familiar with this term as it relates to writing, so many of you are immediately thinking of ... But we're also going to talk about how linguists use this term, ellipsis. So let's get started. We're going to start with the ... ellipsis. We use this ellipsis primarily for two reasons. One reason is that we want to represent a pause in writing, such as in, I think it will be fine, ... as long as multiple people can play the game. Either one of these will work, ... thank you. And also, ... I miss you. Each of these are actual text messages I've received. In fact, when I searched my text messages to find examples of ... I got a ton of results. I actually didn't realize how much people were using it in messages until I searched for it. But you can see that the ellipsis seems to act as a pause between. Sometimes it's used to change the topic of conversation or move the conversation in a different direction without it feeling so abrupt. And it appears it can also add some dramatic buildup in a message like, also, ... I miss you. The second reason we use an ellipsis in writing is to indicate when we've taken some text out of something we've quoted. So perhaps you're writing an essay and you want to quote another scholar. So you found a quote like this and you don't necessarily want to include all of it in your paper, just a few key parts of it. So you use an ellipsis to replace the text you removed. And here you're still quoting the person, you're still using their words, but you're also telling the reader that you've also intentionally left some of the words out. It communicates that you've deleted some of the text. So that was just a review of the ... that you're familiar with, but that's not necessarily what we're going to cover in this video. We're going to now look at ellipsis in linguistics, and in some ways it's a similar concept to what we just covered in that it has to do with omitting one or more words from a sentence. But the words we omit are understood from the context of what we're saying. So we're omitting words so that we don't have to repeat ourselves. This is incredibly common, and I bet you've never given it a second thought. A lot of times this happens with questions. So, when is the paper due? And a perfectly reasonable response is, tomorrow. But if you think about it, tomorrow is not a full sentence, and it is actually really common to not respond to questions in full sentences, because it seems like a time waster. If we responded to the question of, when is the paper due, with, the paper is due tomorrow, we're kind of just wasting time by repeating the whole thing. So while technically tomorrow is not a full sentence, this is a perfectly normal way we interact with each other. Let's look at another example. They have been eating apples more than oranges. By taking a look at this example, can you figure out what the omitted speech is? Pause the video if you need to, because I'm about to tell you. If we didn't omit speech, this sentence would be, they have been eating apples more than they have been eating oranges. You can talk like that, it's perfectly fine, but it's also more common and perfectly acceptable to take out the repeated phrase, they have been eating. So earlier I said an ellipsis in linguistics is the process of omitting or deleting information that is already made available in the context. So from the first clause, they have been eating apples, we already have the information of the subject, they, and the verbs, have been eating. So this is the context that allows us to omit the information in the later part of the utterance. Some more examples. When? I don't know, but John will definitely call. So here we're taking out a whole chunk of information because otherwise it would be, when he will call? I don't know, but John will definitely call. And what about Fred did 3 difficult tasks, but Susan had done only 2? 2 what? 2 difficult tasks. So the full sentence without the ellipse would be, Fred did 3 difficult tasks because Susan had done only 2 difficult tasks. Again, notice how we're only omitting text that can already be inferred in the context. Because of the context, we already know what is trying to be conveyed. All right, so now let's talk about when it's obligatory to delete text. So in other words, when is it basically demanded or necessary to omit text? And what we find is that when we're comparing things, deletion is obligatory. When we're comparing things, like in the example, more people arrived than we expected. So here we're comparing how many people arrived to what we expected would arrive, but we're omitting some words because it would actually be more awkward to say, More people arrived than we expected people would arrive. It actually sounds confusing. What about William has friends in more countries than you? It sounds better than William has friends in more countries than you have friends in countries. It also sounds confusing, so we omit text. Okay, now let's circle back to noun phrases. Remember that in a noun phrase, you have to have a noun or a pronoun. And at this point, you also know that the subject of a clause is always a noun phrase, and the object of a clause, if there is an object, is also always a noun phrase. So here's our noun phrase formula again, and in a noun phrase, we always have to have a noun or a pronoun, but we can also have determiners, adjectives, and prepositional phrases. So I can take the noun phrase kitten and elaborate on it with the formula and produce the noun phrase, a scared hairy kitten in the house. So that's your review of noun phrases, so we can now look at these next two examples. Let's look at the sentence, I ate the leftover cookies. So real quick, I is the subject, ate is the verb, and the leftover cookies is the object. Awesome. Okay, so let's just look at the object in this example. The object is the leftover cookies, and the is a determiner, leftover is an adjective, and cookies is the noun. The word leftover is an adjective because it modifies the noun, meaning it describes something about the noun cookies and modifies how you think about the cookies. Now, let's say you're in the kitchen with your kids and they're in the kitchen looking for the cookies because they know there were some left over from yesterday when you baked them. So they're looking for the cookies but can't find them. So you might say, I ate the leftovers. Because of the context, the kids understand that when you say leftovers, you're referring to the cookies. So you omit the word cookies. Now, when you look closely at this next utterance, you'll notice that our object changed. We still have the determiner the, but leftover is no longer an adjective. In this example, leftovers is our new noun because we need a noun in the object position. And we do this in English a lot, and I just wanted to point out that it can make it difficult to categorize words as nouns and etc. by just looking at the words. You have to see how it's being used in the sentence in order to determine whether that's a noun. Let's look at another example. Some people aren't going. So in this sentence or clause, the subject is some people, and the verb is aren't going. There is no object. And when we look closely, we see that some is a determiner and people is a noun. Awesome. Now, what if we took people away? Our sentence would be some aren't going. So we took away people, and we can do this in a context where the people we're talking to know that we're talking about people. So instead of saying some people, I can just say some. But when we take away the noun people, we have a new noun, some. So our determiner becomes a noun. My overall goal of telling you this is to help you become better observers of language, both in speech and writing. I want you to start observing how we omit words when we communicate. This is a standard way of communicating. If you've watched my video on linguistic competence and hypercorrection, you can relate that to this topic in two ways. First, the process of omitting words when we speak and knowing which words we can omit is a sign of linguistic competence. This is a sign of someone who understands the language. We're not randomly omitting words. We know which words we can omit and which words we can't omit in order to communicate effectively. Secondly, not omitting words when we can may be an example of hypercorrection. If you recall, hypercorrection can be when we forcefully apply non-standard forms in our communication. So in this case, when someone seems to perceive that saying everything and not omitting anything is the rule in English, they may produce utterances like, William has friends in more countries than you have friends in countries. They're hypercorrecting. We may see parents actually hypercorrecting their children even. Have you ever heard an exchange like this between a parent and child? The parent says, would you like some ice cream? And the child says, yes. And the parent responds with, yes, what? So the child is prompted to say, yes, I would like some ice cream. If you think about it, this isn't how we actually communicate in English. Saying yes is considered a full answer, and we can omit, I would like some ice cream, because of context. I'm not coming down hard on you if you've done this before with a kid. For some reason, it's just something parents do. But it is an example of hypercorrection in that the parent is having the child hypercorrect. They're having the child produce an utterance that is non-standard because standard would be omitting the words. Finally, you saw that omitting some words can change the parts of speech. So you saw earlier that sometimes an adjective can become a noun or a determiner can become a noun when we omit words. So it's good to keep knowledge of noun phrases in your head because it will help you identify how words are functioning in a sentence. That's all for this video. See you guys later.